The Galactic Empire believed itself eternal. It had risen across the stars with fleets that swallowed suns and legions that reduced proud civilizations to dust. Its rulers spoke of dominion, as if it were their birthright, carved not by chance but by inevitability. They saw the galaxy as a ladder, every rung a weaker people to be broken, every conquest another stone in their monument to supremacy. For centuries no hand had struck them hard enough to remind them that arrogance is not strength, and so they grew careless, swollen with the weight of their own pride. When they looked upon humanity, they saw only a primitive species, clever enough to spark machines, foolish enough to believe themselves free, but far too small to warrant serious notice. To the Empire, humans were insects, and the powerful do not fear insects. The decision was made in a chamber of polished obsidian where admirals bowed to a throne. The plan was not war, not conquest, but something petty, something beneath even their station. They would take a raid, swift and surgical, striking a world on the fringes of human expansion, not for territory, not for resources, but for demonstration, a reminder that the Empire could act with impunity, that even the young of humanity could be stolen, their cries unheard, their families powerless. This was not strategy. This was cruelty disguised as dominance. They thought nothing of it. They thought it would be forgotten. The ships descended in silence, their hulls gleaming like blades. Villages scattered, towns trembled, alarms screamed into the night. But resistance was thin, disorganized, laughable in the eyes of the Empire. Troopers moved through streets without fear, their weapons trained on shadows that never became threats. The children were taken in moments. 3 small forms dragged into the belly, a waiting vessel. 3 voices silenced beneath the roar of engines. To the Empire, this was victory. To history, it was the opening of a wound that would bleed them dry. The records of the abduction, sealed in archives, were clinical, stripped of emotion. Subject 1, female, approximately 12 Earth years. Subject 2, male, 10 Earth years. Subject 3, female, 8 Earth years. Human specimens classified as low priority for cultural study, medium priority for resilience testing. The words did not mention their names. The Empire did not care for names. It did not mention the tears, the fear, the fist-clenching resistance despite their size. Such details were beneath notice. What mattered was the control exerted, the proof that no frontier of humanity was beyond their reach. The officials signed the documents, congratulated themselves, and moved on to larger matters, never considering that the smallest matters are often the deadliest seeds. The 3 children were ordinary, or so it seemed, born of colonies where humanity pushed against the darkness, where survival was not given but earned. Each carried the stubborn spark common to their kind, the refusal to bend easily, the instinct to stand even when standing meant nothing. The Empire did not see it. They saw only fragile bodies, malleable minds, test subject for cages. Yet within each child was a lineage unseen, hidden even from themselves. A history unrecorded in the Empire's meticulous archives. They were bloodlines wrapped in myth, born of men the galaxy itself had learned to fear. But myths are easily dismissed when arrogance blinds the eye. The girl of 12 years carried silence like a blade. She did not cry long, and when she did, it was not a plea but a vow unspoken. In her stare was defiance too sharp for her age, as though she had inherited not just eyes but the steady gaze of a predator. The boy of 10 was restless, hands twitching as though strategy spilled from him in fragments he did not yet understand. His fear translated into calculation, into watching guards, memorizing patterns, storing knowledge the way a commander stores maps. The youngest girl clung to nothing but herself. 8 years old, yet she met her captors with an uncanny calm, as if she had already measured them and found them unworthy of her terror. They were children in flesh, but their spirits carried echoes that would not be denied. The Empire congratulated itself on efficiency. Reports described the raid as flawless, casualties minimal, resistance negligible. Human settlements left behind would heal, forget, and return to obscurity. This was the pattern of conquest. This was the way things always went. Empires do not fall by stealing children. They fall by arrogance. And arrogance was now sealed in their holds, small voices in cages, carried through the stars toward laboratories that had no idea they had just invited vengeance into their corridors. In their arrogance, the Empire treated the abduction as routine. Troopers joked in mess halls about the weakness of humanity, about the ease of their mission. Officers praised the speed of their soldiers, the precision of their fleets. No one questioned the necessity, because cruelty was always justified when committed in the name of power. The children were forgotten by the raiders who had taken them. To the crew, they were cargo. To the commanders, they were statistics. To the rulers, they were nothing. But to the universe, they were everything. For every empire believes itself invincible until the moment it is not. Every ruler believes their throne unshakable until the ground trembles beneath them. The empire thought it had captured helpless prey. In truth, it had captured 3 stormfronts disguised as children. Their bloodlines were not ordinary. Their fathers were not nameless colonists. They were men who had walked through wars that reshaped civilizations, men whose very names carried weight that made monarchs uneasy and generals hesitate. But the empire did not know this, and so it laughed at its victory, ignorant of the shadow it had just stepped into. Whispers carried through the void, though the empire did not hear them. Among humanity's scattered colonies, silence turned to rage. Families wept, leaders cursed, and soldiers clenched their fists at their own helplessness. But those who truly knew, the few who understood who had fathered the stolen children, did not rage. They did not weep. They grew silent, for they knew what would come. The empire had not merely taken children. It had insulted legends. It had provoked men who lived beyond fear, beyond mercy. An insult, when paid in blood, is never cheap. The galaxy is wide, but history is narrow. It remembers moments, single sparks that ignite infernos. The abduction of 3 human children was one such spark. At the time, it seemed small, a raid like countless others, carried out by fleets that had no equal, dismissed as routine by rulers who thought the universe their playground. But history has a way of magnifying arrogance until it becomes the very noose that strangles. In their laughter, the empire sealed its fate, for the fathers of those children were not men to be mocked. They were storms in human form, nightmares made flesh, and the galaxy had once prayed never to see them stirred again. The empire prided itself on control. Every species it had conquered, every world it had broken, followed the same path: resistance, defeat, assimilation. It believed itself the master of psychology as much as war. Break the body, then bend the mind, and all who resist eventually kneel. The 3 human children, taken from the fringes of a minor colony, were expected to follow this same pattern. They were small, defenseless, and alone. They would learn obedience through fear, compliance through hunger, loyalty through indoctrination. The officials who signed the orders wrote their predictions with certainty. For the Empire, nothing in the galaxy was more predictable than weakness. But weakness was not what they had stolen. The laboratories were sterile, designed to strip individuality and identity. No windows, no voices save the commands of guards, no possessions save the clothing assigned. The children were tested daily, their vitals recorded, their endurance measured, their responses cataloged. The Empire wanted data: how quickly they broke, how deeply they could be programmed, how effectively they might be reshaped into tools. But the numbers that returned unsettled the researchers. Heart rates did not match expected fear patterns. Neural scans revealed unusual resilience. Stress indicators spiked, then steadied, as if the children adapted too quickly to pressures designed to overwhelm them. It was as though they were forged not of flesh, but of something harder, something that refused to yield. The eldest girl gave them silence. Every question met with a stare that unnerved interrogators. She refused to scream under strain, refused to beg under pain. The technicians noted her stubbornness, but misread it as defiance to be corrected. What they did not see was the steel of a father who once stood against fleets without flinching, echoing through her blood. The boy gave them calculation. His eyes traced the routines of guards, the shifts of lights, the intervals of doors opening and closing. He did not waste time with questions. He watched, he remembered, he learned. They marked him as dangerously observant, but believed they could contain it. What they did not see was the echo of a strategist who once outmaneuvered empires in silence. The youngest girl gave them calm. She neither raged nor wept. Her stillness was unsettling, her gaze unwavering, as if she understood she was not a prisoner, but a storm biding its time. The researchers whispered among themselves that the child seemed unearthly. What they did not know was that her father had once walked into courts of kings and left rulers trembling without raising his voice. Fear began as rumor. Guards spoke quietly about the way the children looked at them. They complained of dreams haunted by eyes too sharp for their age. They avoided patrols near the cells unless ordered. Fear spread faster than reports could contain, infecting even officers who had never seen the children. Stories twisted in retelling. The children could see into the soul, could move objects when no one watched, could whisper across walls. None of it was true, yet all of it carried weight, because fear is never measured in truth but in belief. The Empire's officers dismissed the rumors as weakness, but even they hesitated when assigning duty near the human specimens. Fear had no origin, no proof, but it had momentum, and momentum is enough to topple empires. The Empire tried to accelerate indoctrination. They increased psychological conditioning, projecting false images of loyalty, weaving illusions of safety if obedience was shown. The children resisted without speaking. Where most captives eventually broke and accepted the fabricated realities, these three tore them down silently, their minds cutting through deception with instinct they did not understand. The scientists adjusted the machines, recalibrated the simulations, introduced new layers of manipulation, yet nothing lasted. Every test ended in failure, every result in frustration. The data made no sense. Children should have bent. Instead, they sharpened. What unsettled the Empire most was not defiance, but growth. Within weeks, the children displayed accelerated learning curves. Physical training designed to exhaust them instead strengthened them. Memory tests designed to confuse instead became maps for their expanding minds. Patterns of resistance grew more sophisticated, as if guided not by teachers but by inheritance. The boy began constructing tactical responses to guard patterns. The eldest girl developed an unshakable presence, radiating authority even when chained. The youngest became the anchor, uniting the others without words, her calmness reinforcing their defiance. The Empire realized too late that captivity was not breaking them. It was refining them. Whispers reached higher. Reports filtered through bureaucratic layers, each one carrying the same message. The human specimens are not ordinary. Recommendations for termination grew louder, but were always silenced by those who wanted more data, more proof. Curiosity outweighed caution, and arrogance drowned out fear. The Empire had no shortage of conquered species who showed resistance before breaking. To the rulers, this was no different. They believed all things break eventually. But legends do not break. They shatter those who try. The truth of the fathers surfaced in hushed voices, not in official records, for those names were buried, erased, feared even by archivists. But in the corridors of intelligence, in the margins of forbidden reports, whispers emerged. One father had commanded fleets against impossible odds, crushing enemies with strategies that defied prediction. Another had fought battles not with numbers but with will, tearing through lines that should have held, breaking empires with sheer defiance. The last was no soldier, no commander, but something more dangerous, a wanderer whose presence alone could unravel courts, whose silence carried more weight than armies. These were not myths. They were scars carved into the galaxy's memory, men who should have been left undisturbed. Yet their children sat in the Empire's cages, and the Empire had no idea what that meant. Legends do not require armies to make their presence felt. Their very existence poisons the arrogance of empires. Once the whispers spread, once officers connected fragments of truth to the faces of the children, fear became systemic. Troopers stood further from the cages. Researchers hesitated before approaching. Orders to continue testing were followed, but with shaking hands. And still the rulers dismissed it. Still they believed themselves untouchable. Still they laughed at the notion that 3 children could be anything but specimens. Arrogance is the mask of doom, and the Empire wore it proudly. The irony was cruel. In seeking to study the children, the Empire gave them the perfect crucible. Every attempt to bend them only hardened them. Every test meant to expose weakness only revealed strength. Every moment of captivity only deepened their inheritance. The children were not merely surviving, they were becoming. The empire, blinded by pride, became the architect of its own destruction, shaping the very force that would one day break it. The fathers had not yet moved, had not yet risen, but their shadows already stretched into halls of the empire, carried to the veins of their children.